The Vraxian Dominion had ruled the galaxy for centuries with an iron fist. Their empire, vast and unchallenged, was built on subjugating weaker species and harnessing the resources of conquered worlds. They were a force of cold calculation, each victory measured, each world crushed beneath the weight of their superior technology and military might. They had never known fear until Earth. When the Warborn descended upon the desert world of Zolthar 6, the Vraxian forces were caught entirely off guard. It had been a routine mission to wipe out a rebel faction from one of the Dominion's outer colonies. The planet was strategic, located on a crucial trade route, and its population was expected to fall into line under the weight of Vraxian authority. But Earth soldiers weren't just any resistance force. They were the Warborn. Solus led the charge. General Caches Solus, born on Earth but forged in the brutal crucible of genetic warfare, was the epitome of the Warborn's potential. At 6 feet tall, with muscles honed to an almost unnatural degree, and a mind sharpened by years of tactical simulations, she was a force to be reckoned with. Her warriors, equally enhanced and equipped with the latest Earth-made technology, were a perfect blend of lethal efficiency and unwavering resolve. The assault began under the cover of night, a shadow moving through the desert. The Warborn's advanced stealth technology allowed them to infiltrate the Vraxian defense perimeter without detection. In the distance, the Vraxian sentries, who had been trained to watch for traditional threats, missiles, bombers, fleets, were oblivious to the new kind of warfare unleashed upon them. With a single command, Solus activated the signal, and the Warborn exploded from their positions. The chaos was immediate. The first wave was a blur of motion, soldiers teleporting in and out of sight, striking with knives that sliced through Vraxian armor like paper. The enemies, caught by surprise, fought back with crude desperation, firing energy blasts into the dark, but the Warborn were always one step ahead. They moved like shadows, their attacks precise, surgical, overwhelming. By dawn, the Dominion's command center on Zolthar 6 was in ruins. Vraxian tanks, once seen as nearly indestructible, were torn apart by the Warborn's superior weaponry. Entire platoons were wiped out before they could even raise an alarm. The Vraxians, a race accustomed to dominance, were now on the back foot, their greatest strength, their numbers, rendered useless by an enemy that refused to fight by their rules. As the sun rose over the scorched remains of Zolthar 6's military outposts, the survivors of the Vraxian forces, shaken, disoriented, and humiliated, began a retreat. Their commanding officer, Admiral Rogar, had barely escaped with his life. He had never seen anything like this, a human force so powerful, so efficient, so utterly merciless. They weren't just soldiers, they were weapons, designed for one thing: war. But this was only the beginning. Back on Earth, a message was sent across the galaxy. The Warborn were no longer just legends. They were real, and they were coming. The Vraxian Empire had met its first real enemy, and it wasn't going to back down. And Earth had just begun its battle to reclaim its place in the stars. The victory on Zolthar 6 and ripples through the galaxy, but it was only the first wave of a storm that would change everything. News of the Warborn's brutality and success spread quickly through the galactic networks, sparking an awakening across the galaxy. Civilizations that had long been under the boot of the Vraxian Dominion saw hope for the first time in centuries. Some began to whisper about the Earthborn, the mysterious warriors who had decimated the Dominion's forces with an efficiency that had never been seen before. But while the galaxy cheered, the Vraxians seethed. Their empire, once thought to be invincible, was now cracking at its foundations. Admiral Rogar, now stationed aboard the flagship Vraxis, began formulating his counter-strategy. The first thing he realized was that brute force alone wouldn't stop the Warborn. They were something different. Their tactics were unpredictable, their technology beyond anything the Dominion had encountered, And worse still, they had the willpower to match their strength. Desperate for answers, Rogar contacted the Vraxian High Command and presented a chilling possibility. The Warborn might not be simple soldiers. They were engineered, their abilities enhanced by a force unknown to the Dominion. But where had they come from, and how had they acquired such capabilities? Unknown to Rogar, far beyond the Dominion's reach, a different force was beginning to stir. General Caesusalus had sensed it, a presence in the darkness that gnawed at her mind. The Warborn might have won on Zalthar 6, but their victory was laced with an eerie aftertaste. Something was watching them, something far older than the Vraxian Empire, something that hadn't yet revealed itself. And it wasn't just the Dominion that needed to be defeated, it was something far worse. As Salas sat in her command room, staring out into the vastness of space, her mind turned over the strange feeling that had accompanied her victory. A sense of unease crept over her. The Warborn had been engineered to be the galaxy's greatest warriors, but there was a limit to what even they could endure. The question loomed in her thoughts. Had they been created to fight the Dominion, or had they been created for something else entirely? A chance for answers came when the Warborn received an urgent call from the distant world of Naxos, a colony once loyal to the Dominion but now in turmoil. Naxos had long been a site of resistance, a world that had seen the brutal consequences of the Dominion's occupation. The call was from a faction within the Naxos underground, a group that claimed to know the true origin of the Warborn. They had information, critical information that could change everything. Solis immediately dispatched a team to Naxos, eager for any clue that could unlock the mystery of their creation. The mission was risky, Naxos was a war zone, and the Dominion had reinforced its presence there. But the risk was worth it. The answer could be the key to turning the tide of war. Upon landing in the ruins of a former Dominion stronghold on Naxos, the Warborn soldiers encountered fierce resistance, but nothing they couldn't handle. As they dug deeper into the subterranean catacombs beneath the planet's surface, they uncovered a series of ancient data vaults, encrypted files that revealed something disturbing. The Warborn weren't simply soldiers, they were part of an ancient program, a failed experiment conducted by a long-forgotten race. These creators, known as the Exalneri, had once attempted to conquer the galaxy by creating genetically enhanced warriors. But their creations had rebelled against them, scattering across the galaxy in a desperate bid for freedom. And now the Exalneri had returned. The Warborn's true origins were tied to this ancient race, whose mind-bending abilities and insidious control had affected every corner of the galaxy. The Warborn were not just a response to the Vraxian Empire. They were part of a much larger cosmic battle that was yet to unfold. The Exalneri's influence had never truly disappeared. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to strike. Solis's heart raced as she realized the magnitude of what they were about to face. They had not only awakened a sleeping empire, they had drawn the attention of a far older, far more dangerous enemy. The Warborn had always been destined for something greater, something much more perilous than just freeing planets from Vraxian rule. Now the true war was beginning. The revelation on Naxos sent a shockwave through Solis and the Warborn command. The discovery that their origins were not only engineered, but also tied to the ancient Exalneri, a race of mind-bending entities, was enough to leave anyone reeling. What had started as a military campaign to liberate the galaxy from the Vraxian Dominion was now spiraling into something far more complex and dangerous. The Warborn were not simply soldiers, they were living weapons, created for a purpose beyond anything they had been told. And the Exalneri, once thought to be ancient history, had awakened. In the aftermath of the Naxos mission, Solis found herself pacing the command deck of the Hammer, the Warborn flagship. Her mind raced as she processed the data retrieved from the Naxos vaults. The ancient files revealed something even more disturbing. The Exalneri had never truly been defeated. Their influence had been woven into the very fabric of the galaxy, hidden in plain sight, pulling strings from the shadows. It was they who had guided the rise of the Vraxian Dominion, manipulating events to create the perfect conditions for their return. But the Warborn were a complication, an unintended consequence. The Excelinary had designed them to be the ultimate warriors, but they had not foreseen that their creations would rebel. Now, the Warborn were not just fighting for freedom. They were fighting to prevent the return of a galactic-scale terror. The weight of it all was almost too much to bear. Sullus had always thought of the Warborn as humanity's last stand against the oppression of the galaxy. But now, she realized they were part of something far bigger, a cosmic struggle for control over the galaxy itself. "General, the fleet is ready," came the voice of Commander Draven, Sullus's second-in-command. He stood in the doorway, his expression solemn, his tone unreadable. "We're waiting for your orders." Sullus snapped back to reality. "Set course for the Excelinary homeworld," she commanded, her voice sharp. "We don't know what we'll find there, but we need to learn everything we can about them. We need to know why they created us and what they want from the galaxy." Draven nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "Are you sure about this? We're still recovering from the Vraxian assault on Earth, and now we're going after a race we know almost nothing about." Sullus didn't answer immediately. She stared out the viewport of the command deck, her thoughts drifting to Earth, the home she had sworn to protect. Earth, the birthplace of the Warborn, now stood as the last line of defense in a battle that had transcended anything humanity had ever imagined. It wasn't just the Vraxians or the Excelinary they were up against. It was everything. The war wasn't simply about survival anymore. It was about rewriting the rules of the galaxy itself. "I don't have a choice," she finally said, her voice firm. "We need to know the truth. The Excelinary's return means the end of everything we fought for if we don't stop them." The Warborn fleet, a small but powerful force compared to the might of the Dominion, made its way through hyperspace toward the distant, uncharted system known only as the Excelinary homeworld. The journey was fraught with danger, spacetime anomalies, and shifting energy fields that seemed to warp and twist in unpredictable ways. Yet the Warborn pressed on, undeterred by the unknowns that lay ahead. As they entered the system, the dark, desolate planet of Zethros came into view, a world devoid of life, but marked by strange, pulsating energy fields that hummed through space. The Excelinary's influence was everywhere, though they were nowhere to be seen. The planet itself seemed to exude a silent power, its very atmosphere thick with a malevolent presence. Sullus stood at the helm, her hand hovering over the control panel. "Prepare to make landfall," she ordered. "We need to find answers, no matter what it takes." The Warborn were warriors, but they were about to step into a domain of cosmic horrors and ancient forces that even their strength and resolve might not be enough to overcome. The Excelinary had always been the unseen architects of chaos in the galaxy. Now, the Warborn would face their creators in a place where the rules of reality itself seemed to bend and break. And what they discovered on Zethros would change everything. The Warborn fleet descended toward the planet Zethros, its surface a desolate wasteland where nothing seemed to grow. Strange, jagged spires of alien stone rose from the cracked ground like the remnants of some forgotten civilization. Sullus's pulse quickened as the shuttle cut through the planet's atmosphere, her mind racing with the knowledge that they were walking into the heart of darkness. There was no going back now. The Warborn soldiers disembarked swiftly, their boots kicking up dust as they formed a perimeter around their landing site. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's engines. Sullus felt the weight of the mission pressing on her chest, the significance of what they were about to face bearing down on her like a storm. "Keep your eyes sharp," she ordered, her voice steady, though her mind was anything but calm. "This planet might look abandoned, but we have no idea what we're dealing with here." The team advanced into the heart of the ruins, moving with practiced precision. They encountered no immediate threats, but the eerie silence continued to gnaw at their nerves. The deeper they ventured, the more the planet seemed to distort. The very ground beneath their feet felt wrong, as if the laws of physics themselves were shifting. Time seemed to stretch and warp in strange, almost imperceptible ways, making every second feel like an eternity. It was then that they encountered their first sign of life. A single figure stood at the base of a massive obelisk, its surface covered in ancient excellenary symbols that pulsed with a faint, sickly glow. The figure was tall, unnaturally so, with skin that shimmered in the dim light. It turned slowly as they approached, its eyes gleaming with a hollow, unnatural intelligence. A chill ran through Solace as she realized what they were facing. This was no ordinary alien, it was a excellenary. The figure's voice, when it came, was a low whisper, as if the words were not spoken aloud, but directly into their minds. "You seek the truth of your creation," it said. "But the truth is a weapon, and weapons are not meant to understand their purpose." Solace's hand instinctively went to the hilt of her weapon, but she resisted the urge to draw it. The Warborn had fought countless enemies, but this was different. The excellenary were not mere creatures, they were beings of unfathomable power, capable of bending reality itself. Even the most seasoned Warborn felt the weight of their presence. "You're the architects of the Warborn," Solace said, her voice calm but edged with determination. "Why did you create us? What is your plan for the galaxy?" The excellenary figure tilted its head, as if considering the question. "You are not the first," it replied. "There were others before you. Others who came from worlds scattered across the stars. All were created for a singular purpose, to break the cycle of chaos, to bring order. But you, Warborn, are different. You are the first to survive." The words sent a ripple through Solace's mind, her stomach tightening as the weight of their meaning settled in. "Survive? You created us to fail." "No," the excellenary answered, its voice filled with an eerie resonance. "We created you to be a weapon capable of overthrowing the Vraxian dominion. But you were never meant to question your purpose. You were forged for war, and you will never be free of it. The galaxy will never be free of it." The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the air grew thick with a pulse of energy that seemed to emanate from the obelisk. Solace felt a surge of power course through her veins, a dark, intoxicating force that threatened to overwhelm her. Her instincts screamed for her to fight, to take control, but something inside her fought to hold on. The excellenary figure raised one long, slender hand, and the air shimmered with energy. "You will come to understand," it said softly. "You will come to realize that the galaxy has always belonged to us. The Vraxian Dominion, the Warborn, all pawns in a game far older than your kind can comprehend." Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the obelisk, engulfing everything in its path. Solace felt her body jerk, her mind assaulted by visions, fragments of ancient memories, battles fought and lost across time, the rise and fall of civilizations long since forgotten. Her vision blurred, and for a brief moment, she felt as if she were standing outside of time itself, trapped in the eternity of the excellenary's gaze. She heard a voice, her voice, or something like it, calling out through the darkness. "Your war is nothing compared to the war that is coming. Your battle is insignificant." Solace's vision cleared, and she stumbled back, gasping for air. The light receded, leaving behind only the broken ruins of the excellenary structure. The figure was gone. The Warborn soldiers gathered around her, their faces pale and drawn. They had all felt it, the pull of the excellenary's power, the suffocating weight of their ancient knowledge. Solace looked around at her team, and for the first time, she felt a chill of doubt. "What now?" Draven asked, his voice low. "We continue," Solace replied, though her voice betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. "We've learned what we needed to. The excellenary aren't just manipulating the Dominion, they've been manipulating everything. The galaxy is a battlefield, and we're just another piece in their game. but were not pawns, not anymore. Her mind was set. The Warborn would fight, not just to free the galaxy, but to break the chains that bound them to their creators. The true war had just begun. The silence that followed the encounter with the Excelnari was thick, oppressive. The Warborn soldiers stood motionless, their bodies stiff with the aftereffects of the psychic barrage they had just endured. Solas's mind was in turmoil. She had always believed the Warborn to be humanity's greatest weapon, a force designed to break the chains of oppression across the galaxy. But now the truth was undeniable. They were merely tools in a game far more complex and ancient than she could have ever imagined. The vision she had experienced, those fleeting glimpses of a timeless war, a war that transcended the conflicts of her people, had shaken her to the core. It was as if she had briefly glimpsed the true scale of the Excelnari's designs, a glimpse into a war that had raged long before the rise of the Vraxian Dominion, a war that would continue long after it fell. Solas pushed the troubling thoughts aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. The Warborn couldn't afford to be distracted, not now. They had to strike at the heart of the Vraxian Dominion before it was too late, before the Excelnari's influence grew even stronger. But with each passing moment, the weight of their true purpose hung over her like a storm cloud. "General," Draven's voice cut through her thoughts, "we need to move. The Dominion will have detected our presence by now. We don't have long." Solas nodded, shaking off the lingering sense of dread. "You're right, let's finish what we started." They moved quickly back toward the landing zone, where the fleet awaited them. As they ascended into the atmosphere, Solas couldn't help but glance at the dying world below them. Zephyros, once the cradle of the Excelnari's power, was now a barren graveyard, its secrets buried beneath the rubble of an ancient war. But those secrets weren't truly gone. They had been etched into the very fabric of the galaxy, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered. And the Warborn had uncovered them. The question now was what to do with that knowledge. Back aboard the Hammer, the fleet began its journey back to the front lines, but Solas couldn't shake the feeling that they were no longer just fighting for their freedom. They were fighting for their very existence. Days later, as they entered the orbit of a nearby Vraxian stronghold, a message came through from Earth. It was a high-priority transmission, one that couldn't be ignored. Solas's heart sank as she read the encrypted message. "The Vraxians have launched a full-scale offensive on Earth. The Warborn's victory has triggered a retaliation that has already cost us billions. Reinforcements are needed immediately. The war has come to our doorstep." The message ended abruptly, leaving Solas with a sickening sense of urgency. Earth, her home, was under siege. The Vraxian Dominion had retaliated in full force, bringing their greatest weapons to bear against the last free world. If the Warborn didn't act swiftly, Earth would fall. Solas turned to Draven, her face hardening with resolve. "We're going back to Earth, now." There was no time to waste. The Warborn fleet altered course, and within hours they were barreling through the vast expanse of space, heading straight for the heart of the Vraxian Empire. Solas couldn't afford to dwell on the implications of what they had learned about the Excelnari. There would be time for that later. For now, Earth needed them. As they entered the atmosphere of their homeworld, the fleet was met with a terrifying sight. Vraxian warships, massive and imposing, were orbiting the planet, blocking any attempt at reinforcements. Solas felt her blood run cold. The Vraxians had come in force, knowing that Earth's last line of defense, the Warborn, was still scattered across the galaxy. "Prepare for immediate deployment," Solas ordered, her voice unwavering. "We are not losing Earth. Not today." The Warborn fighters launched into the atmosphere with terrifying speed, descending into the chaos below. The battle for Earth had begun in earnest. On the ground, Vraxian shock troops had already begun their assault on major cities, their massive war machines laying waste to anything in their path. But the Warborn had arrived, and they were far more than the Dominion could handle. With precision strikes and overwhelming firepower, they tore through the Vraxian forces, pushing them back from the cities one block at a time. Solace led the charge, her soldiers at her back, fighting with a ferocity that could only come from those who had nothing left to lose. The streets of Earth became a battleground, the ground trembling with each explosion, each fireball of energy that lit up the night sky. As Solace watched her soldiers tear through the Vraxian invaders, the weight of the coming war loomed in her mind. The Warborn were not just fighting for Earth anymore. They were fighting for their very future, and the Excelnari, whose long-dead fingers had been controlling everything from the shadows, were about to feel the full wrath of their creations. The battle for Earth raged on, turning the streets into a maze of crumbled buildings, shattered glass, and firestorms. The Vraxian war machines, colossal and monstrous, had been thrown into a frenzy by the sudden arrival of the Warborn. Despite the overwhelming odds, the Warborn fought with a determination that could only come from the deepest wells of humanity's resolve. They were more than soldiers, they were a promise, a pledge made long ago to protect Earth from the very forces that now sought to destroy it. Solace led the charge, her blade cutting through the armored Vraxian forces with precision and power. Around her, Warborn soldiers fought in perfect synchronization, their movements as fluid and deadly as a symphony. They had no time to think. They had no room for fear. The war for Earth had become the war for their survival, and there could be no surrender. As she moved through the battlefield, Solace's mind kept returning to the revelations on Zethros. The Excelnari had never been just a threat to the Vraxian Dominion. They were the true architects of the galaxy's chaos. The Warborn, forged in their image, had been created to serve as pawns in a much larger game, and yet they had defied their creators. They had grown beyond their intended purpose. But the question remained, what would happen when the Excelnari came for them? They had shown themselves to be beyond anything the Warborn had ever faced, beings capable of bending reality itself, manipulating the very fabric of existence. Solace had no illusion that victory over the Vraxians would guarantee peace. If anything, it would only bring them closer to the true war, the war against the Excelnari. A flash of light overhead snapped Solace out of her reverie. A Vraxian dropship was descending rapidly, its engines blazing with white-hot fury. The ship opened fire as it neared the ground, and explosions rocked the cityscape, sending debris scattering in all directions. Solace ducked behind a crumbling wall, her heart pounding in her chest. The dropship was bristling with weapons. This was a concentrated strike force, unlike anything they had faced before. "Commander, we need air support." Draven's voice crackled through the comms. His voice was strained, urgent. "We can't hold out much longer down here." Solace clenched her fists. Earth's defense was hanging by a thread, and the Warborn were running out of time. She reached for the comms panel, sending a transmission to the fleet in orbit. "This is Solace. I need immediate air support. Code red. Clear the sky." Moments later, Warborn gunships roared overhead, their engines thundering as they dove toward the Vraxian dropship. Explosions erupted in the air as the gunships unleashed a barrage of firepower, tearing apart the Vraxian craft with surgical precision. The ship's descent faltered, and it crashed into a nearby skyscraper, sending a shockwave through the streets. "Focus fire on the remaining Vraxian forces," Solace barked. "We take this city block, or we die trying." The Warborn soldiers surged forward, their energy weapons glowing bright against the night. The Vraxians, though numerous, were no match for the relentless onslaught. One by one, they fell, their armor torn open by the Warborn's superior firepower. But even as the Vraxian forces retreated, Solace knew this was only a temporary victory. The Vraxians were not the true enemy. The Excelnari were. Solace's thoughts shifted back to the war that lay ahead. The knowledge of the Excelnari, their ancient designs, gnawed at her. The Warborn had been created for one reason. to serve as weapons in an eternal struggle that none of them had chosen. But now they had a choice. They could no longer be passive pawns in the Excelnary's grand game. They had to become the masters of their own fate. The Warborn were humanity's legacy, but their true legacy, Solace realized, lay not in their strength, but in their ability to rise above the shackles of their creation. They had been born for war, but they could choose a new path. It was time to shatter the chains that bound them. "General," Draven said, pulling Solace from her thoughts, "we've taken the city block. We're pushing the Vraxians back. But the rest of the fleet is regrouping. They are about to launch another wave." Solace nodded. The battle was far from over, but they had gained ground. "Hold your position," she commanded. "We can't let them retake this ground. We'll push forward and make them pay for every inch." As she surveyed the battlefield, Solace's resolve hardened. The Warborn had come from the ashes of an ancient war, but they would not be defined by it. They would rewrite their story, take control of their fate, and in the shadows, the Excelnary would come to realize that the creations they had once believed to be nothing more than tools had become something far more dangerous, free thinkers, warriors who would stand against the very force that had forged them. For the first time, the Warborn were truly free, and that was a power none of their creators had ever counted on. The Warborn continued to push back the Vraxian invaders, fighting with everything they had. The streets of Earth had become a shattered war zone, yet the Warborn's resilience was unmatched. Every victory felt like a small piece of the galaxy's fractured history coming back together, but Solace knew that the real battle was yet to come. In the midst of the chaos, her mind remained fixated on the Excelnary. The longer the Warborn fought on Earth, the more she could feel their shadow growing closer. The Excelnary had orchestrated this conflict, weaving a web of deception that had ensnared not only the Warborn but the entire galaxy. And now, the Warborn had become an unpredictable variable in their grand design. Solace had no illusions. The Vraxians were merely pawns in a far larger game. Even as the Warborn pushed back the enemy forces, she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that this was all part of the Excelnary's greater scheme, to draw them into a final confrontation, one that would test their very will to exist. As the Warborn forces continued to secure Earth's major cities, Solace and her command team gathered aboard the Hammer. A holoprojector flickered to life in the center of the room, displaying a map of Earth, the Vraxian positions, and the locations of Warborn forces. "We've pushed the Vraxians to the outskirts of the major cities," Draven said, his voice steady but tense. "But they're regrouping. We've neutralized most of their fleet, but we're running out of time before reinforcements arrive." Solace nodded, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. They had gained ground, but it wasn't enough. Earth's survival depended on breaking the Vraxian leadership and taking out their command structure. If they didn't move quickly, the war could drag on for years, and Earth's defenses would collapse under the pressure. She turned to Draven, locking eyes with him. "We're going after their command center. I don't care how many forces we have to face. We take it out, and we end this." Draven hesitated for a moment, but then his gaze hardened. "Understood. I'll assemble the assault teams." As Solace watched him leave, she felt a deep sense of unease settle in her chest. Earth's fate was in their hands, but the longer she fought, the more she realized that this war was never just about Earth. It was about the very survival of the Warborn, the end of the Excelnary's centuries-long manipulation, and the destruction of an ancient power that had molded the galaxy into something unrecognizable. The Warborn had always been soldiers, created for war, designed to fight and die. But now they had learned the truth about their origins. They had discovered the truth about their creators, and they had learned to break free from their control. The Warborn were no longer just tools of war, they were becoming something else entirely. As Solace prepared for the assault, she was interrupted by a sudden communication from Earth's High Command. The face that appeared on the holoscreen was one she hadn't expected to see. A familiar face, but one that sent a shiver down her spine. General Solace, the voice came through, cold and authoritative. It's been a long time. Solace's heart skipped a beat. The man on the screen was Captain Varric, a former Warborn commander she had once trusted, once fought alongside. He had disappeared during the early days of the war, presumed dead after a disastrous mission to a Vraxian outpost. But now, here he was, alive, and seemingly in charge of Earth's defense. Varric, Solace said, disbelief in her voice. What's going on? We're under attack by the Vraxians. Where have you been? Why didn't you contact us sooner? Varric's lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it, only cold calculation. I've been busy, Solace. Busy making sure that Earth remains protected. I had my reasons for not contacting you, but it seems you've stumbled onto something far more dangerous than you realize. Solace narrowed her eyes. There was something off about his tone, something that didn't sit right. What do you mean? The Vraxians are attacking. We need every soldier we have. Varric's expression hardened. You've been manipulated, Solace, just like all of us. The Excellenary are not the only force at play here. The Vraxians? They're pawns in a game, just like you. I've learned the truth, and I've been working with the Dominion in secret. Solace's blood ran cold. You've been working with the enemy? You betrayed us? Varric's smile faded, replaced by a grim expression. No, Solace, I've been doing what needs to be done. The Warborn were never meant to be free. You were created for a reason, to serve as soldiers, not as leaders. Earth's true salvation lies with the Vraxian Dominion. I'm helping them, helping us, bring an end to this endless cycle of war. The shock hit Solace like a physical blow. Varric, the man she had once called a brother in arms, had sided with the very forces they had fought to destroy. He had turned his back on everything they had fought for, betraying not just Earth, but the Warborn themselves. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Solace. Varric's voice softened, his eyes gleaming with a cruel sense of purpose. You and your Warborn are nothing more than pawns. The sooner you accept that, the sooner we can end this war. Solace's fists clenched. The web of betrayal was deeper than she had ever imagined, and now it was clearer than ever. The true enemy wasn't just the Vraxians or the Excellenary. It was those who had once fought alongside them. Solace's mind raced as she stared at Varric's face on the holoscreen, his cold, calculated expression sending waves of disbelief and anger through her. Betrayed by one of her own. The weight of it was almost too much to bear, but there was no time for grief or hesitation. Earth was still under siege, and the Warborn could not afford to falter. You're wrong, Varric, Solace said, her voice unwavering, though the anger bubbled beneath the surface. You think siding with the Vraxians will save Earth? You've fallen for their lies. They're using you, just like they used the Excellenary to manipulate the galaxy for centuries. You're nothing more than a pawn in their game. Varric's lips twisted into a sneer. I don't need your idealism, Solace. I'm trying to save Earth, to ensure its future. You and your Warborn have become a liability. You're not the solution. You're the problem. The Vraxians are the only ones who can bring order. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Solace in stunned silence. The betrayal of her former comrade, a man who had once fought beside her on countless missions, was a wound that would take far longer to heal than any physical injury. But now wasn't the time for mourning or regret. She had to make a choice. Earth needed a leader who could see beyond the lies, someone who wouldn't be blinded by the promise of false salvation. Solace turned to Draven, her expression hardening. Varric is working with the Vraxians. They're not just enemies, they've infiltrated our ranks. We can't trust anyone outside the Warborn. Draven's face hardened, the implications of what Solace said sinking in. Then we expose him. We have to act fast before the Vraxians can use his betrayal to divide us. Solace nodded. We'll take Earth back. no matter what it costs. The Warborn forces were already mobilizing, ready to make the final push into the heart of the Vraxian stronghold. The assault on the command center would be their most dangerous mission yet, but it was also their final chance to end the war on Earth. As they made their way toward the heart of the Vraxian base, the Warborn soldiers moved with precision, their every step fueled by the desire for justice, for their homeworld, and for the future of their people. The Vraxian command center was a fortress, a colossal structure brimming with weapons, shields, and countless soldiers. It was surrounded by a sprawling complex of buildings that had been fortified beyond belief. As Solace and her team descended from their ship, the ground beneath them vibrated with the sound of distant explosions. They had reached the enemy's doorstep, but the hardest part of the war was yet to come. "Hold steady," Solace said over the comms, her voice calm but firm. "This is it. We take the command center, and we end this." The Warborn moved as one, their movements synchronized as they advanced through the complex, their weapons raised. Vraxian soldiers scrambled to intercept them, but they were no match for the Warborn's speed and precision. Every shot that rang out was a testament to their training, to their resolve. The Warborn were more than soldiers. They were humanity's legacy, its hope for survival. They reached the command center's gates, where a fierce battle erupted. Vraxian war machines unleashed hellfire, but the Warborn pressed on, pushing forward with a ferocity born of desperation. Solace led the charge, her sword cleaving through the Vraxian forces with unmatched precision. The walls of the command center shook with the force of explosions, but nothing could stop the Warborn. When they finally breached the inner sanctum, Solace stood face to face with Varric, now wearing the insignia of the Vraxian Dominion. His cold eyes locked onto hers, the betrayal written in every line of his face. "This is where it ends, Varric," Solace said, her voice steady but filled with the weight of everything they had fought for. Varric sneered. "You never understood, did you, Solace? This was always about power. The Warborn were never meant to be free. The Vraxians are the future. You're fighting against the inevitable." "No," Solace replied, her voice unwavering. "We are the future, the Warborn, and we'll be free, not just from the Vraxians, but from everything that's ever tried to control us." With a final swift motion, Solace lunged at Varric. The battle between them was a blur, both of them trained in the art of war, each strike filled with years of conflict, pain, and betrayal. But it was Solace's resolve that held her steady. She fought not just for victory, but for the very soul of the Warborn, for the future of Earth, and for the freedom that had always been denied to them. With one final strike, she disarmed Varric, sending him sprawling to the floor, his weapon clattering out of reach. She stood over him, her breath ragged, her heart heavy with the weight of the cost of victory. The Vraxian forces had been defeated, but the war was far from over. The Warborn were no longer mere soldiers. They were something more. They had become a force of their own, one that would shape the future of the galaxy, not as tools of manipulation, but as free beings, masters of their own fate. Solace turned to her soldiers, the remnants of the Warborn, who stood victorious in the ruins of Earth's final battle. "We've won this war, but the fight for our future is just beginning. Together, we will face whatever comes next." And with that, the Warborn's true legacy was forged, not in the fires of war, but in their newfound freedom to choose their own destiny.